Hi there, and welcome back to the Dad Who Codes. This is Ed. So in the last video, we have an add to do button, which calls this create to do function. This function finds our URL element with the ID of Todolist from our index page. We set this URL element to a variable and attach some HTML content, which represents a to-do list, and we attach it using the insert adjacent HTML function. Now the HTML content is made up of multiple strings concatenated with each other. We're going to clean this up so that it looks and functions better using something called template literals. Before we start, let's quickly clean up our code by removing some comments, as well as removing the style sheet from the tab. So the first thing we're going to do is to fix up the content variable. At the moment, we are concatenating our strings into HTML content for each to-do list item. A better way to do this is to use template literals. So what are template literals? Well, they allow us to write multi-line strings without the need to concatenate strings. So if we look at the content variable that we used before in the previous video, I'm adding or concatenating a string to another string using the plus icon and adding them together in order to make a multi-line string. To transform our content variable into a template literal instead, we will need to surround it with backticks. And what that does, it removes the need to use the plus signs to concatenate our strings. We can just write the HTML code within these backticks and it would function just the same. This is what the backtick icon looks like. On my keyboard, it is found just below the escape button. You will need to look at your keyboard and see if you can locate this icon. Another benefit of template literals is making it easier for us to incorporate variables. Before, we would write a string, concatenate a variable to it, then write another string, so on, so forth. But with template literals, we can directly use our variables using what we call placeholders, with a process known as string interpolation. The interpolation means to insert something into something else. So say we have a variable called this object and we set it to a string, book. In order to add the variable to our template literal, we insert it directly in. The important part is that you surround your variable with what is known as a placeholder. This is represented as a $, followed by an opening squiggly bracket. We enter in our variable, and then we close the squiggly bracket. So now when we call our template literal, it looks at the string, and it also looks at this variable within this placeholder, the variable called this object. And it looks at this object that we declared earlier, which we set to be called book. So this is a Replit application I've made quickly just to show you how the template literal works. So what we have is a div element, which has an ID template literals. If we go to our script.js file, we have a variable called div element that uses the getElementById function to get the div element with the ID template literals. We then have some commented out code. Within it, we have three variables: student1, which is set to a string called Charlie, student2, and teacher, which both haven't been set yet. We also have a variable called temp_lit_content, which is going to be our template literal. This is an h3 element that outputs a string. Our plan will be to use string interpolation to insert our variables as placeholders into this template literal. So to begin, let's uncomment out the code. And a shortcut for this within Replit is to use the command Ctrl and /. Next, I'm going to type in a name for student2. So apostrophe Wendy, close the apostrophe. Then for the teacher, I'm going to type apostrophe Miss Jones, apostrophe, and make sure I close it with a semicolon. Now, to insert it into our template literal, we could put student2 right about here and enter in our placeholder, which is $, open squiggly brackets, student2, then close the squiggly brackets. Now let's do a quick test. We need to insert this template literal content into our div element, and we can use the function we learned from the previous lesson, the insert adjacent HTML function. So first of all, let's type in the div element, which again is pointing to the element on the index page. Dot insert adjacent HTML open and close parentheses. Next, we're going to enter in a position. So I'm going to use before end as I did before. And then we're going to enter in the content, which is temp lit content, and semicolon to close off this function. Next, let's quickly reload this Replit application, and we can say our string up here with student1 and 2 appearing, but we don't have the teacher's name, and that's because we didn't insert this teacher variable into our template literal. So let's add it in quickly with a placeholder again. So $, open squiggly brackets, teacher, close squiggly brackets. And now if I reload the Replit application, the teacher's name, Miss Jones, appears alongside the other students. And this is great. So now what we could do is we can change the variables. So I'm going to make student1 now be called James, and the teacher could now be called Mr. Heisman. And when we reload the Replit application now, student1 does show James, and the teacher is now Mr. Heisman. So next, I have a quick quiz for you. I want you to convert the content variable into a template literal using backticks that I just mentioned. So just pause the video and give it a quick try, and then I'll show you how I would complete it. Okay, so first of all, let's remove all of these plus symbols from our content variable. Then I'm just going to click and hold so that I select all of the string, and then I'm going to click the backtick button. Replit is smart enough that it will surround the whole string with the backticks. Next, we don't need these quotation marks anymore, so I'm just going to quickly remove them. And that should do it. So let's rerun the Replit application again. Then click on the Add To Do button, and you'll see that it still creates the to-do list content exactly like before. So what we're going to do now is we are going to create the functions that will be called when we click on the complete and the delete to do buttons. So I'm just going to quickly paste in what we're going to do as comments. And again, we're going to be creating an onComplete function and an onDelete function. Each one is just going to console log out a message. So for complete, onComplete, it's just going to be complete chord, and for delete, it's going to be delete chord. And what we need to do is we need to sync up these functions to the buttons within our content variable. And the way we do this is using the onClick event. So I have a quiz for you. I want you to create these two functions and to use the onClick event within those button elements in order to call the functions. And all we want them to do is console log out a message. So for the onComplete, it's just going to say complete chord, and for the onDelete, it's just going to say delete chord. And I'll give you a few seconds to do that. So pause the video now. Okay, so what I would do is I'll start creating the onComplete function. So I'll type in function onComplete, open and close parentheses, then open the squiggly brackets. Then within that, I'm going to type in console.log, open parentheses, apostrophe, complete chord, apostrophe, close the parentheses, and semicolon. And that's our onComplete function done. And similarly for our onDelete function, it's going to be function onDelete, open and close parentheses, open the squiggly brackets. Within that, I'm going to put console.log, open parentheses, delete chord, apostrophe, close the parentheses, semicolon. Then I'm going to go to my variable content, and then I'm going to go to the complete button and put in the onClick event and set this equals, and make sure I put the quotation marks, onComplete function, which is the name of that function, open and close parentheses, and let's reload the Replit application and give it a test now. And if I click complete, yep, there it appears, complete code. So next we're going to put in the onClick event to the delete button as well. So onClick equals to quotation marks, onDelete, open and close parentheses, reload the Replit application, and now when I click on the complete button, that still gets called, and when I click on the delete button, the delete console log message gets called as well. So for the final part of this video, we're going to be looking at string interpolation, as I mentioned in the PowerPoint video before. I'm just going to tidy up my code quickly. Let us imagine that we would like to change the console.log message when we click on the complete and delete buttons. We could manually change the console.log messages each time. However, another way to do this would be to pass a value to these functions and then call them as part of the console.log message. This is also known as pass by value, where we are passing a reference to the function. More on pass by value in future videos. So within the parentheses, you can enter in any name that represents this parameter. I'm going to use sentence as my parameter. We are then going to be calling the parameter sentence within the console.log message. So I'm going to show you how I would pass a value to the onComplete function. Then I'm going to give you a quiz at the end of this. So first, create a variable called key, and I'm going to set this into a string called I need to help my daughter with her homework. Next, I'm going to pass this key variable into our onComplete method as a parameter. So we type in key between the parentheses of the onComplete function within the button element. So right now we know that this is not going to work because the template literal won't be able to read the variable key that we've just passed in. Let me just show you what happens when I try to run the Replit application. So when we run the application, create a new to-do and click on complete, the console will tell you that the key is not defined. To fix this, we need to put the key into a placeholder. So go back to our key between the parentheses of the onComplete function. And now we're going to type in $, open and close the squiggly brackets, and make sure our key is within that. Of note, because this key variable is a string variable, we're also going to wrap this in apostrophes like so. Let me update the onComplete, the console.log message to say, what do you need to complete? Now if I run the Replit application again, click on the Add To Do button, and click the Complete button, we can now see the console.log message appear, and it's all working fine. Let's reload the Replit application. So this time I have a quiz for you. I want you to create a variable called newAnswer. Then I want you to set this to any string that you want. Next, we're going to pass the variable newAnswer into our onDelete function. I want you to console.log out this new variable in the console.log message. Pause the video, give it a try now, and I will show you how I would go about doing it. Okay, so this is how I would do it. So variable newAnswer equals to, we're going to be a string, so need to cook dinner for my kids. Then we're going to be passing this variable into the onDelete function within the parentheses of the button element. Next, we're going to have to make sure that the variable is in a placeholder, so $, open squiggly brackets, and lastly, let's make sure that we wrap it in apostrophes as well. then within our onDelete function, we're passing in the new answer variable. Again, we can name this parameter anything we want. I'm just going to name it answer. I'm going to update the console.log message here as well to say, what are you doing tonight for fun? And then we concatenate this with our parameter. Okay, so let's rerun the Replit application again. Click on the Add to Do button. This time click on Delete, and we can see our message appears in the console. So as a recap, we went through template literals and how they can be a way to write HTML content as multi-line strings. This is a better way than adding and concatenating many lines of strings together as we did in the previous video. We also learnt about string interpolation and how to pass variables into the template literals using placeholders, the $sign and the squiggly brackets, and then also making sure that if we are passing in strings as variables, we wrap them in apostrophes. We also learnt about passing values into a function and using them as a parameter. So this is a really important step for the next video in this series, because I'm going to be talking about IDs for these to-do lists. The idea will be that for each to-do list, we're going to have a unique ID for each of them. And in the next video, we're going to be learning about how to pass these unique IDs into our complete and delete functions so that these functions know which to-do list items they're going to be completing and deleting. And as such, we need to learn how are we going to create these unique IDs. So why do these IDs need to be unique? Let's just have a look at our code again and change the onComplete sentence quickly. Changing it to, this is to do 01. And the value we're passing to this onComplete function is the variable key. Let's change the key string to key 01. Let's run the Replit application again, click on Add to Do, then click on the Complete button, and we see the message to do 01, key 01. Perfect. Now if I create another new to do, and I click on that Complete button, we see the same string being output in the console. And this is because all we are doing is calling the exact same onComplete function. At the moment, my code cannot distinguish between these two complete buttons and these two to-do list items. Let me show you the full code for our current Replit application. I just need to refresh the screen and click the F12 button. Then I just need to click the Add to Do button twice and then click on this arrow here to look at our code. You can see that both of these pieces of code are identical and are indistinguishable between each other. What we need to do is, we need to give each of these to-dos a unique ID, and that would appear around here. We would give the li element an ID attribute in our attempts to make it unique from the other li elements that we will instantiate every time we click on the Add to Do button. So for example, this ID could look something like to do 01. Then the second to-do list could look like to do 02. Third to-do list would look like to do 03, so on and so forth. So we just need to find a way where we can set the ID of an li element to a new and unique ID. So each time this ID is generated, it would then be set to the ID attribute of the li element via string interpolation. Once we have our code in place to generate the unique IDs, we are going to code a way to pass this unique ID to our complete and delete functions. So I hope to show you in the next video how we're going to do that. Take care and all the best.